Welcome to another episode of Let's Code. My name is Neil Patterson, and I'm your host today. But I'm pleased to have with me two IBM developer advocates, Dave Nugent and Mary Gugleski.
Hello.
And we're going to be talking about an exciting workshop they've got coming up at the Hybrid Cloud 2021 Digital Developer Conference, which will be taking place September 21st of this year. And Mary and Dave, maybe just give us a brief background on your on what you do as developer advocates and introduce yourself. Mary,
Oh,
ladies.
sure. Yes, so I'm a developer advocate with the WebSphere Liberty team, and I've been with them for about 5 months now. But prior to that, I was with the ecosystem group, so still doing advocacy, but now focusing more on the open source, Open Liberty, microprofile, Jakarta EE, enterprise Java, that area. So yeah, so all the Java, open source, DevOps, cloud stuff, that's all within my area right now. So really like enjoying it, the event-driven stuff too, that which we will be talking about. So thank you.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
Dave?
Nice, yeah. And I am Dave Nugent. I work on the North America developer advocacy team. We cover a lot of different technologies, but lately I've been doing a lot focused on Red Hat OpenShift, hybrid cloud, and Kubernetes.
Sounds terrific. Well, let's go ahead and get started. Tell us about the workshop that you've got coming up. What prompted it? What goals do you have in mind? And really, how does it fit in with IBM strategy?
Sure. Yes.
I can take this one.
Okay.
So this is going to be a really fun workshop. I highly recommend that anybody interested in hybrid cloud come. It's either going to be like a phenomenally successful implementation where you get this multi-cloud streaming platform working, or it's just going to explode in your face. But either way, you're going to learn so much about hybrid cloud because we've got this really interesting architecture set up where we're actually using Apache Kafka, which is this sort of like real-time streaming database, and then we're running it on AWS, on Azure, and then we also have it running on IBM Cloud. And so the question, it answers the question of what if you wanted to stream data in real time between databases on multiple clouds. And so we've actually got it set up where we can assign you a Red Hat OpenShift cluster. You can deploy a Java microservice that actually consumes messages in real time from all these different public cloud providers. So it's going to be really something.
Yes, totally. And I want to emphasize too is the event-driven aspect of it too. And then we'll be leveraging on our really powerful open source capability, the libraries, the Open Liberty runtime, which is built, really is the open source arm of our really robust WebSphere engine underneath the hood. And but of course, it's all open source, and then it works very well with microprofile. Is this microservices library that when I talk to everybody loves it these days because it's so easy to use, so smooth, and the integration, and it integrates with practically everything you can find, right? Kafka, right? gRPC, GraphQL, all these, it works so well. And then also it's standard-based technology, Jakarta EE, enterprise-driven, right? It's just a really robust set of tools that I think, we'll have fun. Like Dave was saying that, I think we'll have fun with this lab. So, yeah.
Yeah, and if you can have fun in a workshop, doesn't matter how long it is, being able to explore different technologies, that really is exciting for developers. Maybe you can give us a little insight into what prompted you to come up with this idea. Why Azure and AWS and IBM Cloud? Why pull those together?
Sure.
That's a good question, and Mary and I ask ourselves that question every time we're confronted with another difficulty in getting this lab up and running and accessible to everybody. But the idea is that as cloud technologies become more and more accepted, not just with startups, but in the enterprise. And we see that enterprises want to choose the best in breed technologies from different public cloud providers and also have some data running in a private cloud or maybe some data running in their private data center somewhere. Right. And so the question is, how can we abstract that away to the point that we can present it in a 1-hour lab? Because we're obviously not going to reinvent your infrastructure in a 1-hour lab or even in, a week. So the way that we decided to do that was using Apache Kafka, with the idea that we could actually pre-provision clusters on different public cloud providers and have Kafka link them together with this sort of real-time messaging protocol. And then we could assign to each person resources on IBM Cloud. So we'll assign to each person a Red Hat OpenShift cluster, which is normally quite expensive just if you add up all the compute resources, storage resources, license fees, all that stuff. But we'll actually be able to assign it to each workshop participant for free for the duration of the workshop. And then we'll let them deploy a microservice application to that Red Hat OpenShift cluster that interfaces with all these different public cloud providers. So it is definitely very difficult if you look at it from an architectural diagram point of view. But since we have all of the pieces already put together, we hope that it'll end up being a really high value for workshop participants with low effort. Right. And hopefully you'll be able to accomplish it within this 1 hour lab. Mary, did I forget anything?
No, you did not forget, but I was gonna add that the fact is we have worked through this kind of, all the little things that we are worked through, and we'll make it kind of easy. So then when it comes to you to try this out, it really should become very smooth, that you can actually just see messages flow and they are run in different environments. I think that's the exciting things. And that's what actually prompted me, especially when Dave and I were trying to come up with some idea. I was saying that, well, what would be, like, and actually the one thing I kind of in my mind too, I was thinking when RESTful API first came out, then we have like public web services API that anybody can query, right? You can go to weather.com, get all that stuff, and you can still do it. So I feel really the thing is that in the future, perhaps is an event-driven type of queues topics where you can fetch data. So I think it's still some ways to go, but I believe that what we are doing is at the tip of an iceberg, that we're bringing something new and exciting that's going to be event-driven, is asynchronous, this efficiency, this real-time aspect of it. You can deal with large amounts of data. So I think that's where the excitement will be too. And
Great,
so, yeah.
great.
So,
so you mentioned Kafka, and I know that I heard clusters. So I'm assuming it's Kubernetes or Red Hat OpenShift. So, but what other technologies are we talking about here?
We have all the buzzwords, Neil.
Okay.
we have all the buzzwords. I mean, so I have a slide up here on my desktop. I don't know if we can take a look at this, but one of the things that we're using is microservices. And the idea is that if you have a bunch of these microservices, and we cover this in the workshop, so I'm just going to give you a little bit of a teaser here. But if you have all of these different microservices that you've implemented, you need some kind of way to connect them all together, right? And so the simplest way is maybe, this is a quote from Martin Fowler, an HTTP resource API, right? So you just have like a RESTful API and the microservices can call each other. But then of course you run into capacity issues. What if one microservice is running into some issues with capacity and it's returning 404s? So Kafka is a way to really help with that, right? Because you end up with this almost like a queue, like an ordered list of events that microservices can consume as they have the capacity to do that. So when you see these different microservice styles, what tends to happen is that when you're linking them together, a lot of times you use some sort of event processing platform like Apache Kafka. There's a bunch that we actually host on IBM Cloud. And so we're trying to show a best in breed architectural style for developing microservices, but also linking them together across clouds. So we've got microservices, we've got Apache Kafka and event streams. And then Mary, maybe you can talk a little bit about the Java side of the microservices.
Oh, sure. So the runtime too, now we'll be using Open Liberty as the microservice. As you know, it's such a flexible library. It's runtime, right? And it actually runs also on OpenJ9, which is a perfectly, very, very capable and efficient, streamlined JVM that you can find on Earth, I'd say, because it's built for cloud native and it's really perfect. You don't need to do anything extra. Open Liberty comes with it and like that. And of course, too, now here you see on the screen is MicroProfile. And again, that's an Eclipse Foundation open source project, formed by a working group from different companies and community. So it's truly a very efficient and very optimized library that, again, works with many different things, right? Not just Kafka messaging. You can actually hook up with other messaging systems, MQ, like all the other ones too, RabbitMQ, for example, things like that. So it's really highly efficient. And again, I wanted to point out that it is optimized and also standard compliant with Jakarta EE. So it really is a very versatile kind of set of tools that you can think of. It's really efficient to be running on cloud native environments. So it's all ready and won't waste you money, because that's the thing, when cloud native, everything is money. So you want to make sure a very efficient ecosystem framework. Right. So yeah.
Yeah, I think I saw a report out just a couple of days ago that Open Liberty was now supporting MicroProfile 4.1.
That's right.
Did I see?
Yes.
So yeah, so the latest and the greatest in terms of the standards that it's based on. So as we look at how you put the labs together, and you sort of given an overview of what you're doing for the students to enable them to be able to get through it in an hour. Would you like to share some of the challenges that you had in putting this lab together? It sounds like you had a few.
That's right. Yeah, totally. Yeah. So maybe I'll just start by saying, right, because as such, right, pops up type of messaging capability in Kafka. So that will involve, your producer. We need to produce. And so that's what we decided. Dave and I, we talked about, we said that let's do it on Microsoft Azure. And that's what we were thinking of. And then came to find out, okay, Confluent Cloud has the managed Kafka platform that's already integrated real well. And that's what we're using, the Confluent Cloud and everything. So first of all, to set it up, and because also with that, Confluent Cloud is new to us, so we also have to learn as we go. And yeah, it's a lot of things in there. And Dave was just looking at, now we're going to have a team of people working on this project. So not just like developing a simple case. So we need to like manage access control lists, things like that, right? So we have to get into that level of details. And Kafka also manages in terms of like messages and partitions. And I won't get into all the details, but it's just some of the things. So we have to kind of arrange it too properly so that each lab participant be able to consume messages accordingly like that. So that's like on the producer side. And of course, if anytime you do this kind of things, you need to involve with security. So there's also the security aspect as well that we are looking into and setting it up for everybody. And then on the consumer side, now that's the part that we're using our Open Liberty, OpenJ9, all of these technology from our IBM open source team. So leveraging on microprofile, working with Kafka connector. At first too, we weren't sure which connector, it took us some time to kind of figure out. It's kind of the excitement of doing something new, like what tools do you use, Lego pieces, what things do you do? And so we're kind of starting almost kind of like from scratch from all the Lego pieces, and then we figure out the solution. And that's how we kind of like pick and choose all the different pieces. And maybe Dave, you can also supplement because I probably forgot something.
That's exactly right. I mean, one of the issues being a developer advocate too is that when you're working with so many different technologies, because we mentioned about 10 so far just in this talk, yes. Right? And you can put them together so many different ways. You're looking at like 10 factorial or something like that. And then if you do something, if you architect it just a little bit less efficiently than you could, then you're sending a less than ideal message to everybody in the audience, right? And so we went through so many iterations where we were saying, oh, well, let's install Kafka as an operator through the Red Hat OpenShift Operator Hub, and then we'll use Strimzy, and then we'll connect to that, and then we'll use Mirror Maker 2 to connect to Confluent Cloud. Oh, that's a little less efficient than we wanted. Okay, well, maybe we'll do a direct connection. So there's just so many different ways to piece all these things together. We think that we finally found a way that's quite efficient. And that is also easy for lab participants to use. And so, yeah, we hope that is the case. But who knows? I mean, maybe somebody who takes the lab will be able to find a more efficient way, and we'll be able to distribute that to everybody who attends the lab. We love the sort of interactive part of the lab where people in the audience are able to make suggestions, and we're able to incorporate them into our lab materials.
Sure,
yeah.
totally.
You mentioned an architecture. Did you have a diagram or something that you kind of explores that?
That's right. Yeah.
We don't have a diagram of everything. I can walk through a little bit of Red Hat OpenShift, and I can also walk through a little bit of Kafka. So Mary was talking a little bit about sort of like this Kafka terminology,
Hmm.
where you have clients and servers, you have sort of like producers and consumers. You have messages. So the idea, one of the ideas of Kafka and Confluent is that instead of looking at databases as a collection of things that each have attributes, like a record with a GUID, you actually have events. And events are just any data payload that's tied to a time, like a timestamp. And so thinking about streams of data as groups of events instead of items in a database allows you to abstract away things like message queues much easier. But then Mary also mentioned partitions, consumer groups. There's a whole bunch of stuff inside Kafka. And I think, Mary, did you want to share the slide
Oh,
that you're in front of?
yeah, true. I can do that. I was putting it myself small to do that, but yeah, but you have your things in. Although let me see how I can. I don't know if I can share or something. Oh, okay, and maybe I
Let's
just
make
shrink
Mary
up
big.
myself. If you want to make me big, then we can kind of quickly share, right?
Yeah.
This is kind of like the high level design if you can see it well. Basically, too, from the consumer side, right, or the lab participants, we're going to be the one consuming the messages. So as you can see, right, on my diagram here, I kind of lay out, right, the high level thing that we're just gonna guide you through setting up all of the OpenShift little kind of details, and those are the things that we have been spending time on sorting it out. Now, one thing I actually have to tell you what happened, because we are involving, our registry, right? When we're doing OpenShift, we naturally would involve Docker to pull the images and all that. And I ran into this problem. Oh my gosh, I couldn't figure out. Came to find out because my Docker hub, I forgot, right? I thought, okay, this exercise, I was able to deploy it before building the images and everything. How come I cannot push it to my registry? Guess what? Because I totally forgot about my Docker hub, I enabled two-factor authentication, and then my OpenShift couldn't handle it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I totally forgot. And anyway, so small things like that, we are working through sorting them out, and we reminding you, so kind of making it a lot easier for you
Right.
to work with them. So
So,
that type of stuff. So anyway,
so that raises a interesting question from other news that came out this week. Um, what do you think the impact of the Docker changes will be to this lab, or other types of deployments?
yeah,
That's going to be really
that's
interesting to see. So many of our labs and tutorials out there online utilize Docker Desktop as an
that's right.
educational tool
Right.
That's
for
yeah,
end users to be able to build images.
that's
And
right.
so, is that something that those end users, if they work at enterprises, are not going to be able to use anymore?
That's right.
That could affect. We might have to rewrite a bunch of our labs in order
Yes.
to do that. Luckily, from our perspective, we'll always be able to use Red Hat OpenShift source to image deployment to automatically create and deploy container images from a GitHub repo from source code,
Right.
and then we could always change environment variables based on the Red Hat OpenShift UI or CLI. So it's not like it'll totally stop our labs, but for a lot of the content that we have out there, that could affect our enterprise
Yeah.
customers.
I know I'm going through a few tutorials that I've been asked to update, just to see what the impact would be. So, yeah, good to know. Um, I don't think I don't see any questions from the audience at
Did
this
I
point. So
forget
I'll go
myself?
ahead and ask another one.
Sure.
What do you think what are you looking to have the developers do as a result of this workshop? What will the impact be on developers?
On developers. Yeah.
Great question. I guess I'll go first. So it really depends on where you are in your enterprise's sort of like life cycle journey. So if you're already using Kubernetes, then maybe this is something where you will learn more about Red Hat OpenShift. If you've already moved from monoliths to microservices, then you're probably already familiar with tools like Apache Kafka. But maybe this is something where you'll learn more about sort of the open source alternatives to whatever messaging service you're currently using. But if you're not, like if your enterprise is not currently using Kubernetes, not using OpenShift, not using Kafka, then you could potentially learn a whole host of new technologies and actually build, implement, and deploy them within the short span of a workshop. So being able to get your hands dirty with all these different things, I think, is the big benefit of these interactive labs, as opposed to just a session where you hear about things and you go through a PowerPoint. And then since you'll have access to that Red Hat OpenShift cluster, you could potentially try to deploy your own code onto it and see how that works. It's really fast and really scalable. Obviously, if you were to use this in an enterprise deployment, you'd have more than the three compute nodes that we're going to give you.
Yeah.
But you can still prototype it.
Sure.
Totally. Yeah. And I also feel, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Go ahead, Mary.
Yeah, and I also feel too, right? It's not, well, this is an example of using a Java framework, but obviously too, you can say you want to use JavaScript, because this is all cloud native, it's all microservices. So you can actually essentially take this Kafka's consumer and try to do it in Node.js as well. So we are hoping that through this exercise, we're giving you the steps. How do you build, get it ready, right? Get the image stream ready and do the deployment and all these other things that we give you ideas. So then you can take it to other flavors of languages and develop something similar to what we have done in here as a hands-on. So even if you are not a Java developer, you should be able to take this and just deploy and see how it works and adapt it to your particular language of choice, for example, things like that. So,
or multi-languages.
That's right too.
Just a little bit of a spoiler. A lot of the microservices that are acting as Kafka producers may not be in Java. They may be in JavaScript. They may be just a shell script somewhere.
That's right. Yes, totally.
So aligned with that, sort of the idea that with cloud native, you could have consumers that are in one language, one environment, producers in another language, another environment. How do you see this impacting, sort of the future of computing? What's the end goal of being able to do these kinds of event-driven examples?
Yeah, totally. So I feel, right, it's, to me, I feel event driven would become the future, and because even looking at today's world too, we are looking at everybody, right? All the components are coming together, different flavors, different ways of implementing. You want to have a very efficient way of each one communicating with one another. Mm-hmm. So if you can kind of do it so you enable the messaging part to be kind of generic, it's just over the wire. You're trying to take all of these components and look at them like producer and some are subscriber, like that. You can essentially kind of make it agnostic, your whole system agnostic to how you develop these things, and then again link everybody together using an event-driven messaging type of systems. And they take care of all of the back pressure, for example, things like that too, like communicating, right, over the wire, all of these. And then it's just up to each component. They have libraries to serialize and deserialize all your data accordingly when you travel through the wire. So to me, I feel the event-driven way would be the way to go, and also the asynchronous nature. So makes it even like more efficient too. You're preventing a lot of blocking scenario, and also large volumes of data, I think, can easily be handled by event-driven systems a lot more efficiently. So yeah,
and scaling, I would think, is a big benefit of that too.
That's right.
Being able to scale your systems and scale only the things that need to be scaled at the time.
That's right.
Scaling and team velocity as well. If you can have multiple teams, each working in different languages, different hardware, whatever works for the particular project. And that goes back to the hybrid cloud methodology too, where you can actually have teams building microservices on different clouds if you needed to.
Yeah,
that's correct. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Well, sounds terrific. I know I'm looking forward to the Hybrid Cloud Digital Developer Conference,
Yeah.
and I'll look forward to seeing both of you on September 21st. And I think what you've laid out today is just a real teaser for what developers can find when they come to your workshop on that date. So thank you both. Any closing comments?
Can I play us out with a little video clip that Mary and I made?
Oh, sure.
We spent a few $1 million making this video. So let's see if it loads properly. I never know if it's gonna. Oh yeah, here we go. Oh, this is perfect.
All these features can help to solve the internal communications problems that exist throughout the business community today. The speed and capacity, the power and flexibility of proved IBM electronic computers and supporting data handling units can speed and smooth your internal communications right now. Just ask, and we'll show you how.
Very cool.
So yes, if that wasn't a teaser, I don't know what is.
Right. So be sure to come and register for the Digital Developer Conference and check out the lab that Mary and David are going to be giving. And with that, I will thank you all for attending and look forward to seeing you at another episode of Let's Code.
Thanks, Neil. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.